As we end the month of International Women's Day, we're keen to explore some of the issues that can affect women's finances and how being financially confident helps you as you move through the different stages and eventualities of life. So we have an hour today. We've got a lot to get through. We've got an incredible panel, and we'll have some time at the end for questions. There should be a Q&A box on your screen, so please feel free to submit questions as we go along. We are broadcasting live, and what we're talking about today, we're giving insights and factual information. We're not actually able to give financial advice, so if you do need advice, please do reach out to an advisor at the end. So the topics that we're covering today, we're going to discuss financial empowerment. We are going to think about how we pass wealth through the generations, and we're going to be asking ourselves why women make better investment decisions. Interesting one. So now I'd like to introduce our amazing panel. We have Christina Rogers, who is one of our chartered wealth managers. We have Victoria Perkin, who is our senior associate in private law and tax. And we have Sarika Danjal, who is our head of investment managers. So welcome, panel. How are you all?
Good, well, thank you.
Good, good, good. Thank you very much for joining today. I'm excited. Should we get started?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, right. So let's get on with our first topic, shall we, which is financial empowerment. I'm going to start by reading a quote, and that quote's from Forbes from 2024. Okay, so financial literacy isn't empowering, it's transformative. Being financially literate means having the knowledge to make informed decisions, invest wisely, and protect and grow one's assets. Very true, I think, isn't it? Mm-hmm. I'm going to start with you, Christina. So why is this so important for women? Tell us more.
Well, I mean, actually, Caroline, I think it's probably important for everybody.
Agreed, yeah, agreed.
I mean, the focus of the webinar today is on women, but I think some of the takeaways are going to apply to anybody.
Absolutely.
And within relationships, different people will take different roles.
Sure.
Yeah. So when I'm sitting down with people for the first time and talking to them, very often I find that they've built a lot of different things over the time. Yeah. Might have accumulated workplace pensions when they started working, other bits and pieces if they've gone along. If they're within a family, they might find that within the family, different people are holding different investments, different things.
Yeah.
So when we sit down, it's really about, do you know what you've actually got? And that's really the place to start.
Okay.
Can you get it all on one piece of paper? Work out everything you've got within the family, and what does it actually mean for you? I think that's probably the first place to look, because that conversation very often leads to people almost going down the back of the sofa and finding what have we got within a family. And then the next question to comes is, what actually are these things? Yeah. And particularly around pensions, there are so many different types of pensions you can accumulate over a lifetime, different types of investments, that it's really helpful to sit down and work out what it is you've actually got. Now, I think probably partnering with an advisor, I would say that, I'm a planner myself, but partnering with somebody who can explain what you've got, but put you in a position of knowledge.
Yes, absolutely.
So you can understand, this is what I've got, and then start to work out, what is it doing for me? Yeah.
So that's it. It's starting with being prepared. So being intentional, you know, making that effort to pull everything into one page, as you say, and then starting to work through what that actually means for you, I think is what we're saying here. So the planning, the preparation and the organisation.
Absolutely. But I would say we're going to have lots of people listening today. So we might have business owners. The number of female entrepreneurs is going up.
Yep.
And we could be a bit like Women's Hour. Apparently, a lot of their listeners are men, so I hope we've got men listening too today. So lots of different people in lots of different situations. And I think, you know, when I say get everything on one piece of paper and arm yourself with some knowledge, that's not necessarily saying become a tax specialist.
Sure.
Become an investment specialist. But it is saying that partner with people who are prepared to answer the questions that you've got and put you in a position where you feel you've got sufficient knowledge.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess as we work through, you know, go through our careers and go through life, you might, you know, join a scheme that your employer offers.
Absolutely.
And then
Very
you might,
common.
and you might take out a bit of insurance and then join another scheme, etc. So it's almost getting that audit trail, isn't it? And remembering the things that exist, even if it's from sort of quite a while ago, or things, I guess, that have even come through, that have been inherited. But sort of getting it onto one page.
Yeah, very often share portfolios are inherited, and I sit down with somebody with a share portfolio and ask why they're holding a particular stock, and it's actually something they've inherited and they've held on to. So get the knowledge, make sure you partner with people who are prepared to answer those questions. Also, don't feel you've got to become an expert, and don't think there's a binary decision. I think that's the one thing after 30 years of doing this job that very much I've realised. It's really about how the finances are helping you achieve what you want.
Sure.
As opposed to something is right and something is wrong. Yeah. And that's actually the danger with sort of Googling things, actually, because you don't get that nuance of your particular situation. And that can be an important thing to think about.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So get to know your family advisors. There might already be advisors, and I know within my family setup, my husband doesn't get involved with the finances at all.
Okay.
So if something happened to me, I would want him to get to know our advisors in advance so he could talk to them. So that's also something that's quite important.
And is there something here, Sarika, around confidence?
I definitely think there is, and I agree with kind of that knowledge that develops the confidence. It makes sure that, if you've got the confidence, you're going to be able to make decisions with more clarity, more focused decisions. And I think that then starts to impact on the wider kind of the health of women and I suppose that relationship between finance and making some of those complex decisions, because again, it's less stressful if you know your finances are sorted. Again, it doesn't have such an impact on your mental health, because, finances is quite a worry for a lot of people these days. And I think, linking that into, what Christina said around that knowledge, we're not necessarily saying have the knowledge of, how to do things, but just the knowledge of where to go to find that support.
Definitely.
That's really important.
Sure, which is the planning element, I guess. And just thinking about what Christina said, that sort of going behind the sofa, I think we talk sometimes around it's the carrier bag, isn't it? Just collate all the papers that you can find, even if they date back from whenever, and just, get it into that carrier bag, and that's your starting point to then turn that into the sort of plan on the page. Vicky, I'll come to you. What else would you add?
It's something we're going to talk about further a little bit later on, but again, getting everything sorted, getting everything organised, having that confidence obviously assists with succession planning as well, and understanding the one piece of paper method is a brilliant way of kind of consolidating everything, just to make sure that you do know what you have. So if any life changes or any bereavements, and you find yourself in quite a stressful and difficult position, then you have, so to speak, got your ducks in a row to make sure that you know exactly what you're dealing with.
Sure, and that's something actually we'll come on to as our next topic, succession planning. But I think before we move on to that, Christina, coming back to you, if I may, what are, for those that are listening now, what are the key takeaways? How can we support with that sort of financial empowerment, that preparation? What are the things that you would say, definitely think about these areas?
Okay. Well, I think the first thing that I would come to think about is get to know the advisors. If you don't have advisors, reach out and find advisors. So different people on the call will have different advisors in place already. One of the places I do signpost people to is actually a government website called moneyhelper.gov.uk that has a lot of really good information. And if you are wanting to go online and look for information, I would say that's a great place to start. It's an impartial place. If you're over the age of 50, you can have a free consultation with a pension advisor. The government lay that on. So that's a good thing, and it's a great source of information. Obviously, our website has a lot of information, and we have advisors who can help as well. The second thing, thinking particularly perhaps about women, but of course we make these generalisations, but again, it can cover everybody, is when you're looking at a career, perhaps in the workplace, if you're not an entrepreneur but you're working for somebody else, taking career breaks, maternity leave, things like that, that can all have an impact on a woman's long-term financial planning. During those periods where you're not earning to the same level, are you saving for your retirement, for example? So I think that's one thing that I would just flag, particularly to women, as it is International Women's Day, and that is something we're talking today, that it's really important as early as possible to check out what you actually have and get those projections to retirement and have a look at that. The second thing, actually, so we're end of tax year.
Yes.
And so one of the things that we're talking to lots of clients about that people can do after the call today, it's not financial advice, but it's a good place again to get that knowledge, is go on the government website and have a look for a prediction of your state pension.
Right.
And see if you have any national insurance gaps. Particularly relevant at the moment because we've got a change coming in on the 6th of April where the time you can go back to catch up is actually being shortened.
Okay. So that is the trigger point, the 6th of April. So that gives us quite a short window.
Yeah, so I think that's something that people can actually Google and go onto the government website. Do be very careful of pension scams. Make sure it's the gov.uk website, and also Money Helper will signpost to that. So if you do have missing contributions, don't jump to do anything. There's a helpline that you can ring and you can get information. So I think that's one bit of housekeeping. Everybody listening, it's worth doing if you haven't already. The second thing to actually have a look at is we're coming to the end of the tax year, so allowances like ISAs, pensions. If you're a business owner, talking to the business accountant about how you're extracting money from your business. There's an awful lot of female entrepreneurs now. So making it as tax efficient as possible. That's something you will need to speak to a tax advisor or a financial advisor about your own situation before you make those decisions. But that's certainly a conversation that I'd be looking to do.
Okay, and I guess there's something in there as well around, you know, if we're talking about preparing and being organised, actually don't necessarily wait until you're at that sort of tax year end deadline for some of the things that you can do. If you can do them earlier, then you probably should do them earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it could be, you know, the tax years don't run in calendar years in the UK. So 5th of April, current tax year finishes, 6th of April, a new one starts. So treat that as your New Year's resolution. And maybe the New Year's resolution on the 6th of April is, well, okay, I'm going to have a look at what I've got.
Yes.
I'm going to seek advice if I need to.
Yep.
I'm going to look at good websites and get some information from there. And also one final thing, particularly we talked about workplace schemes, and if you've changed jobs, is engage with your workplace scheme. The government legislation means that auto-enrolment, more and more people are going into workplace pensions, which is a great thing.
Yeah, really is.
Particularly for low earners, you know, to do that saving. They put in, the company pays in as well, very tax efficient. But very often those schemes have default funds.
Right.
So you need to make sure that the scheme you're in does reflect your own situation. Lots of the providers do have very good information on their websites. I won't mention any names, but normally workplace schemes, they tend to be a few, they have good information. Start there, and obviously we're here to help if you want to reach out and get some advice.
Okay, fantastic. So what we're hearing, again, just to sort of summarise, it's that be intentional. You know, don't be put off by, it feels like a daunting thing to do. Don't be put off by jargon. You know, get that plastic bag filled up, you know, or ask questions, whether that's to your advisors, whether that's to sort of to the family, if you haven't necessarily taken, you know, prioritise an interest in that area. But understand what it all means for you today and then in the future. Have that sort of connected thinking, you know, talking to sort of different advisors depending on the areas that might be important to you, and start planning, take action.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Vic will come on to talk about it, but one of the things with this is it's not something you can avoid. Yeah, because of women's life expectancy, it's probably something that will happen. And just being aware of what you've got now, but now is the time to do it. Do it when you're younger because you're thinking about what am I going to retire on, but also engage with the advisors. So it could be within a family, as I mentioned, my own situation, one person tends to take the lead
Sure,
in the finance and one person doesn't.
Yeah.
That's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Play to your strengths. But the important thing is that if you have changes in the relationship for whatever reason, whether it's through bereavement or divorce, you can find yourself coping with the emotion of that and also coping with trying to understand who the advisors are. So the earlier you can engage and build those relationships, the more support you'll get and the more comfortable you'll feel when those things happen in the future.
And I think that's the key, isn't it? It's feeling comfortable and confident, you know, at a time that can be quite challenging.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we talk about that, don't we? And it is a really challenging time. And where you've met people beforehand, it just makes such a difference.
I think that's quite a nice segue, actually. You know, just thinking about those types of life events that happen to all of us. Should we move on to succession planning? So I've got another quote to read out, actually. This time it's from the Financial Times. So in the UK, as much as 60% of the nation's wealth is expected to be in female hands by 2025. So that's this year.
Okay.
Panel, does this surprise us? Vicky, what has led to this growth? You know, what do we think here?
I don't think it surprises us at all. As we've mentioned before, women are living longer. They are outliving men. We've got a lot more successful women, women in senior positions. There's an increase in female business owners. And I think that one of the other things is we are seeing, as women are outliving men, we've got inheritance is passing more to women. So of course their wealth is increasing in that respect as well. And I think the biggest issue that we're facing is that not everybody has the correct plan in place for succession. So we've talked about during lifetime getting everything kind of get everything set up, the knowledge, the confidence, but having that plan in place where if something happens, there's a big life event or a big change. Not everybody has that succession plan in place, so it's important to be able to put that in place to be able to put everything together.
Yeah, and I guess, it's not always easy when you start to think about some of these sort of traumatic things that could happen in life. It would be easy just to sort of put that conversation or thought process, in a box for a period of time. So I do get that. I mean, Sarika, what's your view in terms of that statistic? 60% of wealth in women's hands.
I think it shows almost like that dynamic shift of where we've come from in terms of that financial empowerment of women. It also in terms of kind of them being able to make choices, the complexity of the roles that they take on. So I think it's definitely a positive step, and it kind of speaks probably volumes more so than some of the other kind of data out there. I think as well in terms of that succession planning specifically, letting family members know where things are and what have you, that's still quite a taboo at the moment, where, certainly the older generation, they don't have open conversations with a lot of the younger generations as to where things are, and then it's all, the younger generation that often struggle to kind of help to put that. So again, back to the analogy of the plastic bag, it's really important to have all of that stuff, in one place.
Yes. Sure, yeah, that makes sense. So Vicky, what I guess practical points could we talk about today when we think about succession planning?
So I think it goes without saying we need to look at kind of three areas. You need to look at putting a will in place. Priority number one, just to cover what your wishes are if something were to happen to you. I think the second thing we need to look at lasting powers of attorney. We'll come on to those in a little bit more detail, and then it might be going that one step further and looking at how do you pass your wealth down, and whether there is a requirement for any trust in your family, whether that be lifetime or through your will. So that's something we need to consider. In terms of your wills, if you don't have a will, your estate is distributed in accordance with the rules of intestacy, which may not fit your particular circumstances. So what you need to do is speak to the appropriate people, your advisors, your financial advisor, your legal advisor, and you need to put something together that fits your circumstances and deals with your wishes.
And I guess, that practical point, it is that just general housekeeping, isn't it? And that's not linked to age or wealth. You know, everybody should do that, because regardless of assets or one's financial position, the fact is, if something were to happen to you, then the people that are left to deal with your, you know, with your estate or your finances, it just makes it harder for them, doesn't it? You know, outside of maybe it not being your wishes that are being followed, it's just hard work.
That's it, and just by simply taking that step and putting a will in place, you're opening the family dialogue, as we've touched on.
Yeah.
And you know, you start to ask questions, and you start to think about speaking to your family about what you're doing, where everything is. You know, you open that dialogue so that if something does happen, everybody is a little bit more in the know.
Yeah. And how, you know, how often do we change our wills? I'm guessing it's not something that we would do every single year, for example, unless driven by a life event or a change of circumstances.
Yeah, just big life events. So, you know, kind of remember births, deaths, marriages, divorce, you know, anything, change of assets, change of wealth, just simply change of what you want to do as well. You know, family dynamics, anything really where you think it necessitates a change. Just thinking more about it as well, it's women are living longer, so we need to, they are carrying kind of the burden of the inheritance tax as well, with the wealth passing down, and kind of if a female is living longer, then they're likely to you know, take the burden of the inheritance tax. So again, it's taking that one step further, looking at your will and seeing what can I do to kind of mitigate this.
Yeah, absolutely.
As well, which is important. The other thing we're seeing as well is not as many people are getting married these days as they used to do. So you need to consider that as well, and how that affects your wealth distribution, you know, if something were to happen to you.
And it's interesting, I'm just going to pick up because you used the word burden there, and that's exactly it, isn't it? It's trying to avoid these types of things becoming a burden by that future planning and having those open discussions, whether it's with your advisors, with your family members, etc. And I think, as you point out, you know, today it's things have changed. You know, getting married isn't necessarily the typical route that it was.
Families
Yeah,
now. Families,
exactly.
you know,
Exactly.
look very different than they did before, and I think that's a driver of wills as well. And there's also the practical things. Sometimes people talk about the intestacy rules and they think, well, I don't need to do anything because that kind of may be what I want. But, you know, in practical terms, when I'm dealing with clients where somebody's passed away, accounts that are held in sole names will become frozen effectively when they die. Now, it could be that was the account that was paying the mortgage. It was paying the gas bill, the electricity bill. And so I think that, you know, for everybody, we will say two things we can be certain of: death and taxes. Okay, so you can do some planning for the taxes, and you can prepare for somebody passing away, and particularly if it's somebody that you're relying on financially, whoever that may be within the family. And you actually need to think about, in practical terms, what will happen if you pass away today. It's a really horrible thing to think about, but the time to think about it is when you can talk to that person and say, where is the piece of paper, Excel spreadsheet, whatever you want to do, where is the list of what we've got, and how will I be able to pay the bills? I mean, Vicky, you can probably talk a bit more about the practicalities of dying without a will. And you know, it takes a while to get probate if that's what you need to get. So it's, how do you pay the bills? How do you keep the family running? If you've got school fees to pay, how you know, how do you support the children through that transition? And you need to do it before the person passes. Yeah,
I think that's a really good point, because the last thing you want is to be in a position where assets are frozen, and then you can't just continue with the day to day.
And you're grieving, right? It's
Absolutely.
the worst possible time to perhaps meet an advisor for the first time, or try and understand where the family wealth is. You know, so it's these nuts and bolts. And interestingly, about you're talking about unmarried couples. So there has been quite a lot of changes with pension legislation. And, you know, a housekeeping thing on the succession is check your pensions and check the beneficiaries of your pensions.
Okay.
Because pensions are one thing that don't need to wait for probate. So you need to make sure that the beneficiaries on that pension scheme are the people that you want. And I'm amazed at the number of times I meet people and we check and it doesn't list family members, particularly where you've got blended families. Yeah, perhaps you might have stepchildren, other people. So encountering that is really important.
So that's another really kind of good point, I think, and hopefully a really good takeaway. And I think when it comes to pensions, the specific form to ask for it's called an expression of wish form, isn't it, for pensions?
Yeah, but might call it beneficiary form as well.
Okay.
Actually. So, and whoever your pension provider is, if you go onto their website, again, be really careful of scams, make sure it's their website. You can actually do a search which is expression of wish or beneficiary, and if you need to, give them a call.
Yes.
Yeah. Pension providers are so keen for people to fill out these forms. They'll do everything they can to make it easy for you. Very often, if you've got an online login, you can actually do it there and then.
Okay. So that's definitely a takeaway from today, I think. And Vicky, you talked about powers of attorney, lasting powers of attorney. Now, I think we're starting to see more and more actually, whether it's adverts or TV broadcasts, etc. It's making people aware that these types of things are not just for when you are old. It's for everybody, isn't it? So again, a key takeaway. But tell us more.
So your lasting power of attorney is obviously you're still with us, but sadly don't have the mental capacity to deal with your own affairs, or in a situation where you do have mental capacity but may need some support there. So this is where you can put everything, your wishes down really as to who you would like to take care of your affairs in those circumstances. Again, we can have different powers of attorney that are applicable at different stages.
Okay.
So we can have powers of attorney that cover potential business interests, if that differs from the individuals that you would want to look after your own personal affairs.
Right.
So there are ways in which your powers of attorney can be tailored. They're not just a simple, straightforward document. They can be tailored depending on your particular needs and requirements. The other thing, again, like you've said, is that we can be in this situation where something were to happen to you where you lost mental capacity. Yes, it's more common when you're older, in old age.
Sure.
But sadly, it can happen when you're younger as well. So there isn't a best or worst time when to do them. It's just something that you need to think of alongside putting your will and your lasting powers of attorney in place. So you need to do both together.
Okay, and I guess there's something here as well about when we're thinking about succession planning as a topic, it's making sure that all of your advisors, if you have sort of people on the team, are actually connected as well.
Definitely.
So Christina, you've talked about the work that you might do around looking at the wills and the beneficiaries there. The pensions and the beneficiaries there, and then we're thinking about the wills, the powers of attorney and inheritance tax planning. So actually making sure that you as the advisors are on the same page with that. Yeah.
Having a meeting together, really, really vital, because it means actually that people get to know each other, and you work together as a team for the family. And there may be situations where there's complications within the family. So, for example, it might be that for whatever reason, a parent decides that they don't want to distribute the wealth completely equally between the children. Perhaps one child is, perhaps more successful in a slightly different situation. Or, in my personal situation, my husband's Italian. That gives a complication to our own tax planning as well, because we're covering two tax jurisdictions with very different rules actually. With Europe, anything that fell under Napoleon has the Napoleonic, we call it forced heirship. So it's a bit different than in the UK. So where you've got that, it's really good to think about it ahead of time, not make assumptions, particularly if within your family you have those different jurisdictions that come into play.
Interesting, interesting. That's the key, isn't it? Don't make assumptions. So we come back to planning, be aware, have the conversations, will and powers of attorney, get them done. Think about the beneficiaries linked to any sort of pensions or other plans that you might have, and understand that sort of connected world, how it all fits together. you know, to ensure that it meets your requirements today and in the future.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant, fantastic. Shall we move on to topic 3?
Yeah.
Okay, I have another quote to read, this time from the Warwick Business School. I think we like this one. Okay, so all wannabe stock market titans should now take note. Women are better at investing. So the analysis done of 2,800 investors found that not only did female investors outperform the FTSE 100 over the last 3 years, but they also outshone their male counterparts. I'll leave that to settle in.
You know, I'm really glad we included that, and I do love that quote. It does make me smile.
So, on that basis then, Sarika, why? Why are women more, and I think it is important to say generally, more successful investing?
Yeah, I think it's a very bold quote, and I do really like it because I think it has almost changed the traditional narrative that we've kind of all maybe, you know, grown up with, what we've experienced historically. I think generally it's around the approach taken by women. Research has shown that they tend to be, you know, do a lot more research. They do a lot more kind of looking into the detail, understanding the detail, taking the time to you know, look at it, how it affects the impacts, and that then leads to making, you know, clearer, better informed decisions. And I think it also then relates to, because they've got the confidence, the knowledge that they're making the correct decisions, they've got a little bit more of a long-term focus, so they're more comfortable with the decisions that they make, and therefore they're not potentially, you know, looking to trade a lot on the investments that they have. So again, the cost of trading doesn't then start to impact that part and slowly erode at it. So again, I think, you know, there's a couple of reasons why, just generally why I suppose women are more naturally, you know, just with some of the natural characteristics that they have, you know, that impacts their thoughts and investing.
It is interesting. I mean, you know, Christina, obviously you're sort of speaking to clients day in, day out. Is that your sort of experience?
You know, it absolutely is my experience. And I think that one of the trends perhaps is that sometimes people lack the confidence. But you know, the killer questions, as I call them, the question that gets to the nub of the issue, it does tend to be a woman that asks me those questions. And also I think then taking the time as an advisor to answer that question fully, it means that there's much more openness at the start of the investment relationship. You do take a little bit more time. That's great.
Yes.
You only want to part with an advisor who's prepared to answer the questions and will take the time. Yeah, this is planning for your family's future and your future for the rest of your life. So you want to take your time to make those decisions. But yeah, I mean, anecdotally, it's certainly my experience. Might not be for everyone, but it's certainly mine.
Sure. And I think the thing is, you know, having access to Google, you know, to the web, it gives us so much useful and rich information. But sometimes it's too much. Yeah. You know, that can be overwhelming. If, you know, just to think about, how do you start to look at where to invest, what to do?
Sometimes it's inaccurate, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's the people giving the information are owning a stock and they're pushing a stock to get you to buy a stock. Yeah. So there's a lot of great information. You know, I'm all for people being empowered with knowledge, and certainly the opportunity is there. But I think you do have to be quite wary of the sources of information that you're going to.
Yeah.
And also, you know, the whole, where financial advice is good is where it's tailored to your situation. And Google doesn't know your situation. ChatGPT is probably a little bit better at knowing your situation, but still it gets things wrong.
Yeah.
And you know, that's really important. What's your situation? What's your tax situation? But what are your goals? Yeah. What do you want to achieve with this money? Yeah. And then you can work backwards with what's the best solution. But you always have to have an eye on where you want to get to.
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting, you know, in a way, and sort of going back to that quote, you know, women have come a long way. I think, was it 1970 or something when we had the first woman on the stock exchange?
1970 today, actually, 1973, so 52 years ago today.
Wow, okay.
That was after I was
listed.
born. I mean, I was feeling quite old. But, so I was born into a world
Yeah.
where a woman had not been on the stock exchange.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And
Yeah,
if you
that's
look
crazy.
at the statistics, it's almost there were still men at that point that voted against it, so they had to have a vote.
Yeah.
And out of the 29 individuals, there were 5 votes against it, which, you know, is still quite shocking. But we've come a long way in that time.
And if you think about the different generations, because I'm sure if we started to talk to, you know, the next generation, you know, my children, your children, about these things, they've been born into such a different world that they probably can't even comprehend there was such a difference, you know, not that long ago.
Yeah. And of course, those women are alive today.
Yeah.
So the women who, for example, I know in somewhere I used to work, where you got married, you ceased working when you got married. You weren't able to continue your job within the financial sector as a married woman. Obviously, we're saying about the stock market.
Yeah.
But some of those women are alive today. So what planning have they been able to do?
Yeah, that's
even
true.
if they wanted to. But it's never too late. You know, there are lots of people that you can reach out to. And having a secure financial future is probably everybody's goal.
Yeah.
So it's the way to do it. Empower yourself, get the knowledge.
And, you know, it's never too late to start.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're saying. So regardless of sort of age or position, you know, just think about understanding what investments you have, and as you say, align it to what does that mean for you today and for the future. If you're starting off in careers, I guess it's thinking about just start saving. You know, almost don't overthink it. Just start sort of saving, and don't be put off by the jargon or that sort of too much information. Keep it simple.
Definitely. And, you know, keeping it simple, doing the job 30 years, and I've encountered lots of people during that time, and there can sometimes be a tendency to overcomplicate something with jargon, but my experiences have always shown me that there isn't the substance behind that.
Yeah.
So you want to go for people who are speaking plainly, that you can engage with, will go to the right level of complexity for you. And if you feel there's jargon, don't feel intimidated by that. That might be an indicator, an instinct that's telling you this isn't quite right.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So it's having the confidence to challenge.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. Fascinating. I think, you know, we could take any one topic and probably spend the whole day talking about it, couldn't we? But I would like to, you know, give our sort of listeners the opportunity to ask some questions. So thank you for your rich insight. Really useful. I think now what we'll do is just take some of the questions. Just as a reminder, you have a Q&A box on screen. So please keep the questions coming in. And also at this stage, we're not able to give individual advice. This is more just trying to help with the tips, considerations, some of the general housekeeping. Right, let's move to the questions, shall we? So our first question, I think probably, Christina, this one's for you. You mentioned a government website. Can you just reiterate what that was and also what it actually does?
Sure. So I think the website grew out of a couple of websites called moneyhelper.gov.uk, and Moneywise as well will get you there. And it basically was government's response to a lot of information online. Yeah. So it's really important that when you're Googling, looking online, that you're going to the right sources of information. The regulator, the Financial Conduct Authority, is really worried about the number of scams, particularly with pensions. So I don't think we can ever talk about finances and not sort of raise the flag to warn people, do be cautious when you're looking online, disclosing your information. Yeah, there's a lot of good sources of information out there, but do make sure the source is the right source. Never disclose your financial information.
Yeah.
You know, don't be afraid to put the phone down. Nobody will ever be offended if they've rung you and you put the phone down. They'd much rather you're more cautious about fraud. And you know, if it looks too good to be true,
yes,
it is
it
too
is.
good to be true.
Yeah.
The number of times, particularly I find with older clients actually, they seem to get on a list somewhere and they're constantly being mailed some fantastic investment return rates and that sort of thing. You're looking for somewhere that's regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Do your research and reach out to trusted firms who are regulators such as ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's the point, isn't it? It's all about, I think our job is to give that peace of mind, and it covers all of those things that you've just mentioned there, doesn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so the next question, and I think probably this comes to you, Vicky. We've seen that you can do your own wills. And I'm guessing that's, downloading from internet or going into a WH Smith's and buying a pack.
Other news agents are available.
Other news agents are available, yes, indeed. But is this something, does that DIY approach work? Is it okay? Is it a case of, just get the will done no matter how you do it? Or would you always advise that, having somebody to support with the process is the best way to go?
There are various different products you've probably seen. You can kind of buy off-the-shelf wills that you fill in by hand.
Yep.
And but they can be done, but we wouldn't recommend it.
Right. Okay. And why is that?
Well, just because your will needs to contain a certain level of complexity. It can be very, very simple, but as we've said today, there are so many different things that you need to think about. Your will needs to think about kind of the short term, the here and now.
Mm-hmm.
To have a good will, it needs to be thinking a little bit further as well down the line. Well, what if and what if and what if this happens? So again, that's something that you might not be able to do yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And even thinking about that, it might not be something that you can write yourself correctly. And when you're gonna you write your own will, the level of ambiguity you're creating is huge.
Really? Okay, that's
and
interesting.
One thing that Christina, you said when we need to obtain a grant of probate in order to kind of administer your estate, ambiguity is just nothing. You do not want any.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
So by doing your own will, you're creating uncertainty, ambiguity, and to be honest, you're risking it not even working. So what you've spent your money on, however little it is, and people often go down this route because they are cheaper.
Sure.
But the cost shifts from here to the other side.
Right. Okay.
Where, you're doing something that you think is simple and straightforward here, or I can just put that in place. But actually, you're shifting the responsibility and the ambiguity, the uncertainty, and the errors to a time where you're no longer here. So how do they go back and look and think, well, what did you mean by that? You're not here to answer that question anymore.
That's
so
a really
how
good
on
point.
earth does that get established?
Yeah.
And we talked about families changing, didn't we?
Exactly.
And remarriage, all sorts of complications, different children. It's just families look very different now, which is great, and perhaps than they did in the past. But it means that more and more, I don't know about you, Vicky, but seeing more and more wills being challenged, and very often where it's been okay is when an independent solicitor has been able to say, no, I sat down with your mum and this was exactly what she wanted to happen and this is why. And so I think that, if you do have a slightly more complicated family setup, then, as you say, you're passing that ambiguity. And then if you start to get challenges to the will, you're delayed in the money paying out. The legal fees will go up a lot quicker.
Yeah, so it's those unintended consequences, isn't
definitely.
it? Yeah,
it is, and it's the number of contentious probate matters where arguments do happen. The number of contentious probate lawyers just generally has increased so much over the last however many years. And I think one thing that you need to be aware of is if you've got conflicting family interests, you've got blended families, you've potentially got some disputes already in the family or family businesses or underlying things there, it's gonna, the only people that benefit are the individuals that need to sort that.
Okay.
So that you're going to find your estate is potentially spent on legal fees rather than actually going to your family, which is where you wanted everything to pass in the first place.
So I think we've safely answered that question and sort of justified that at the same time. So thank you. Okay, next question. Potentially one for you, Christina, although I will sort of open it up perhaps more widely. So what is the best advice you can give to a woman who is going through a difficult divorce and isn't savvy with the family finances? where do I start? Great question, and I can see that a lot of emotion are wrapped around that question actually.
Yeah, so I deal with a lot of divorcees actually. A lot of the advice we've talked about today applies. Yeah, I'd actually say it says the questionnaire. I mean, I hope you're not going through a difficult divorce, and if you are, then there is light at the end of the tunnel, and things will improve, and they do improve, and I see clients years later very happy. So you have our support in what you're going through. I think it really does come down to knowing what's within the family, and if possible, doing that before you think about filing for divorce. Yeah,
right,
so if you can do it in advance, that's really, really helpful. Say the key reason for people getting divorced is money worries. So who knows, by actually engaging, finding out, getting the famous one piece of paper, the Excel spreadsheet, whatever it is, it might actually facilitate conversations that actually solve some of the problems within the relationship anyway. So so there can be positive unintended things from engaging. When you're looking at divorce, one thing that a lot of people do forget about is pensions. All the family pensions potentially will be considered marital assets and will be looked at. I think mediation has come in with no fault divorces, so that's definitely gone up. But the pension sharing has gone down as that's happened. And anecdotally, lawyers I speak to and also family mediators think possibly that's because people are taking less advice because it's the no-fault divorce, and they're not thinking about the pension as a valuable asset for the future. Yeah. So I think know what you've got. Don't proceed with a financial settlement until you really know what there is. Be careful about the valuations that you get from final salary schemes, things like that. Using a bit of jargon, apologies, you need advice. You need advice when you're dealing with this, and whether it's from a family lawyer, the mediator and a financial planner, just to kind of give you the background of what different assets can do for you when you're dividing assets.
So I guess it's you need your team around you, and that sort of plays into that to give you the confidence, particularly if there's not feeling savvy and probably going through quite an emotional time. So it's lean on the experts. This is the time when they can really add the value, give some peace of mind, explain things, and really look out for your best interests.
Yeah, and possibly don't take the first set of figures you're given totally at face value, and do a little bit of digging. And make sure that you make a settlement based on the accurate information. And that goes for both sides in a divorce. You have to disclose everything, but do check and do understand. Yeah, very important. And of course, actually one thing we didn't mention about the wills, of course, we've talked about divorce. Marriage invalidates a will. And so, there's lots of things we read about in the press where somebody in old age has got married and not realised that the will that left everything to the children from, say, their first marriage is invalidated, and that's correct, isn't it?
So that's any kind of life event, really. That's the time to think, let's sit down, let's revisit the piece of paper and think about what changes we might need to make, off the back of that life event. And get everybody in the room so that, again, it's like that resetting the plan if needs be, isn't it?
I think in situations where you're looking at divorcing as well, it's the finances which might be priority to you at that time, but it's thinking about the succession planning as well, because it is a life event, it's a change, and it's something that might necessitate a change in the documents that you've put in place. So
it's a really, really valid point.
That step further.
Good, thank you. And obviously, I'm guessing, Christina, if anybody needed to reach out to you just to get some more clarity and advice.
There's lots of sources of information actually on that one, but make sure you get the right advice, and don't feel there can be a lot of pressure and emotion obviously involved with a divorce, and sometimes there can be coercive control in relationships as well. And so anybody who's perhaps struggling with that, there is help out there for you. But don't be forced into making any decisions, and make sure the divorce is legally completed. There's a couple of high-profile cases where the divorces were sort of like DIY divorces, weren't legally completed, and somebody's gone back years later and actually sort of like made a claim on financial assets long after they stop living together.
That's a good tip.
And actually mentioned, if you're not married, be aware, and not legally married within the UK, so certain religious ceremonies within the UK don't count. And you can have women who have been married, brought up children, and then discover they were never legally married within the UK, and they don't have those protections. That's a real issue, actually.
Okay, another good point to make. All right, I mean, I can't believe how fast the time has gone today. We have another question. We've got a few moments only, unfortunately, to answer it. But the question is, the world is uncertain at the moment. What should I be thinking of when I come to invest?
We're all looking at you, so
I think that's one for me. I think it is challenging because I agree, you know, the world is uncertain. There's so many unpredictable events that can affect investments. I think the key there is not to almost be worried. With investing, there's an element of kind of behaviours and psychology that sits behind that in terms of the decisions that you make. And it's almost just having that conviction in your decisions. If you are worried, you know, reaching out to professionals like Christina that can kind of give you the background as to why things are happening. But ultimately, you have to cast your mind back around why did you set that money aside? What's your objective for it? And if it's meeting that objective, it's on track. Long-term thinking, you need to just, you know, leave it there and, you know, seek advice if you need to.
So don't be distracted by noise.
That's it. Cut out the noise.
Cut out the noise. Think about your long-term plan.
That's it.
But engage. Don't be
Yes.
afraid to ring up and say, I'm worried about the stock market. I think, you know, there's been a lot of political, we all know who I'm talking about here recently, but actually the impact on the market very quickly sort of gets eased off.
Yeah.
But don't be afraid. And if you don't have an advisor, well, you need an advisor that you can pick up the phone and have that conversation with. You definitely need that. That's so important.
Yeah, agreed. So it's that, you know, I guess when it comes to investing, it's you're thinking about the longer term.
Yeah.
You're trying not to get distracted by the noise. We talked about the tax, you know, the sort of the tax efficiency or the tax wrappers earlier, just thinking about tax year end. Which it all comes back to your plan, doesn't it? Fantastic. Well, that's all the questions that we've got for today. I think there's been some really useful answers to those. So again, I'd like to thank the panel. I'd like to thank everybody for joining. If you can take a few moments to complete our short feedback form, we would be very, very grateful. The link should be in the Q&A box. The feedback form is really useful because it allows us to think about what are the subjects you might want us to cover at future webinars, but also more generally how we might improve our future webinars. A link to the recording will also be sent out in the next few days. So once again, thank you all, thank you to the panel, and thank you for joining.